Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Delighted to be with you all today. I'm just going to be a short while, just back from vacation and really digging out and catching up, but did want to say hello. Couple of thoughts on my mind. I was in Switzerland for a week. First time. What a lovely, lovely, lovely country. Things were quite expensive. I guess that's the case in Switzerland generally, and the US dollar against the Swiss franc certainly added to that. And it was tourist season, but this is when my family was available. I celebrated my 60th birthday, so probably now 30-ish years working in data protection, 35 maybe consumer protection generally. Well, I thought I would do some work while I was traveling. I did read a book that I guess I'll consider work. Ari Parparo, long time ad tech guy who now runs a sort of media and education company called Marketecture, which is all about helping people who care about ad tech keep up with what's going on. But has worked at a number of the key companies over the years, wrote a book, I think it's called Yield. But anyway, it's all about from DoubleClick to Google and the trial, and the big focus really is the competition issues. For me, having lived through DoubleClick and then AOL and these developments when ad networks were sort of a more static type thing where companies represented particular websites and sold the advertising on their behalf, to the whole world now of real-time bidding and header bidding and exchanges. Really a fascinating walk through the history, but also the business challenges that drove the market to where it is today, right? And where is it today? Today, it's in the midst of debates about competition. It's in the midst of debates about how the changing behavior in search, in social media, and now in AI may affect when and how we end up, reading news, reading content, and as a result, how ads will or won't be part of that future. So I do recommend it. Really fascinating. But one key point that I take away from it is that people who don't understand the ad market or publishers and revenues very often come to data protection with a very narrow prism and don't fully appreciate the consequences perhaps for competition. The UK CMA situation was sort of a unique one where you had regulators working together because of this significant impact that changes around privacy that might be made in that case by Google, but frankly by every ad tech, by every publisher, have for these broader issues of competition. Alan Chappell, who actually provides some content for Marketecture, but also a longtime ad tech consultant, published an interesting LinkedIn post where he debates, and a Marketecture post where he debates and discusses the NLYB recent critique of pay or consent. And the critique is that there should be other business models that publishers should use because the pay or consent one doesn't really work for them. Now, we have already guidance, obviously, from EDPB and others around social media and pay or consent, that there needs to be sort of a high privacy free option if you're going to have an option to pay or an option to consent. Obviously, some of the social media companies don't see how they'll navigate that. Evidently, they're so critical, and also their advertising is so all-encompassing and high risk that there needs to be a new option that has less data in some manner. But what about all the other publishers, and how are they affected by that, and are they different? And in this world where we don't know what to believe, where you're seeing all the AI fakes, we're seeing all the noise on social media, it's more important than ever that we have quality media and that they have a revenue stream. And since it doesn't seem like governments of the world are stepping up to support it, and frankly, in the US, imagine if the government was actually controlling the media by somehow providing that support. It's either subscriptions, which are critical and are the first place to go, but there's only so many media that we're going to subscribe to, and the economics are quite challenging. And advertising has, for many years, filled that space. And advertising, banner advertising, requires some data or more than just context. What is the context for Putin in the Ukraine? What is the context for Gaza? What is the context for flooding? The ads that appear on those pages need to be driven by data about the user, because in so many cases, the context is actually not enormously useful. But I discuss this for our data protection community here because I do think that regulators and experts in the space need to have a wide enough prism such as to understand that what is necessary, what is reasonable, what is proportionate, in my view, should also be shaped by the factors in society and in other risks that are created and other downsides that are created when you constrain one particular path forward. The Federal Trade Commission, on a different note, warned this week that companies that don't use end-to-end encryption where their standard might call for it or bow to censorship might be violating the Federal Trade Commission Act. Obviously, this is a very broad argument, perhaps a political one, made by the FTC. We do see, obviously, pressures on Apple, on Meta, and others by governments and law enforcement around the world to break encryption, to provide backdoors, to create risks, or to not provide the encryption. And so presumably they're speaking up to provide some pushback there. Exactly where the FTC authority is, I mean, clearly if there's a place where encryption, end-to-end encryption is called for, and that would be the minimum, and you don't provide it, then the FTC has an argument that you're doing something risky and dangerous, and under its unfairness prong could act. Is it the standard that you need to have end-to-end encryption? Well, many services don't, and many services can't easily do so while still perhaps having advertising or filtering for spam or others. It is a technical challenge, but it's one that companies are stepping up and meeting. But whether not providing it is something that means that you're falling beyond the standard of what is, reasonable and appropriate, and that you are therefore doing something unfair or even deceptive, I think is a bit of a harder case to make. In terms of censorship, it seems to be the hook there would be disclosure, that you it's hard to see how you couldn't provide a censored service if that's what your goal was. But the disclosures that you might need to make so that users understand, hey, this service is going to be censored, well, maybe there is a bit of an argument there. But anyway, it's unusual times, and the FTC is keeping us guessing. That is sure. One thing I also experienced on my trip is I was doing a lot of, I needed information. Where's the best hotel, or which hike is the best one to take? Which restaurants are going to meet the dietary concerns that we have? And in the past, I'd be searching and then looking through the different websites. And I was turning first to the LLMs that I have on my phone. And that is a huge change in behavior. I think, like many, when I have a question, I'm increasingly finding it easier to ask the question. And I might use, a search engine, but I'm going to be reading that AI summary. They're getting better and more effective. That answers the question as opposed to gives me sites to look through. And this is enormously challenging for publishers who used to be the place you went, and then they had their revenue. This is changing. I don't have a good solution for the economics and the business model and the effect on those publishers, other than, if their data is valuable and they can license it, but there's only a limited number, I think, that have the depth and the quality and the interest. Some of them are providing their own LLMs, but how many of those publishers would be the first place I go to ask certain questions? Again, certain very large ones, possibly. So I don't know the answer, but I do know that those of us who are working on issues like what is reasonable or what is necessary around scraping, around deleting data, as user behavior starts to change, as the models are better and cheaper and available and fast, we need to stay right at the edge to understand how that should shape the policies and decisions. We certainly are seeing DPAs providing far more flexibility because of their awareness of the AI race than they have previously, and in some ways taking that into account. The data protection principles can't and shouldn't change, but being cognizant of what is reasonable, what is necessary, what is proportionate, I think does change based on people's expectations, based on the value, the benefits. In that regard, I haven't yet purchased a pair of AI glasses, but now the latest Meta ones have longer battery life, which has always been important to me. I hate carrying around so many chargers, and I'm starting to, look at getting them. I had the Google Glass for a while, just to understand, why would people use these? And I think that getting away from simply looking at your phone when speaking, I find that very often I'm asking the question, because the voice recognition is so effective, the voice transcription. And if my hands are tied up, or if it's just quicker for me to speak it. And so clearly getting, and when it's mapping and when it's information about my environment, I was in Switzerland. I wanted to know, well, which mountain am I looking at? Is that one Pilatus? Is that one Rigi? Is that one Bergenstock? What am I looking at? I stayed in Wingen. I'm looking around. What is that? Where are the glasses that are going to be helping me? So the privacy issue, obviously, that is immediate, is you got a camera on your face. There are bystanders. Where and how do we deal with the fact that it is going to be necessary for a car that has cameras to be aware of a bystander, to see the bystander, my smart glasses, robots. Sometimes there's a place there for de-identification, but cars often need to know which way am I looking, so I know whether the bystander is walking, in a certain direction. And again, things can be kept on the device, can be kept on the car. There's different minimization, but again, we're training AI. We want these things to get effective. Understanding that balance, really, really critical. We're about to kick off a project on bystander privacy, so hopefully we'll be able to think through some of those issues. I do apologize. One thing I did not do on vacation, I was going to read about model context protocol to get a little bit deeper on it. I do need to. I'm speaking about agentic AI at the Global Privacy Assembly in Korea, the annual meeting of all of the World Data Protection Commissioners and many leading organizations. So I'm making sure I know what's going on, and talking to some of the key people in the area. But model context protocol, which Anthropic developed and OpenAI and Google have embraced, which helps create sort of a standard for not just privacy, but the rules for how your publisher site your service should interact with the agents. Again, critical for those of us in AI and privacy to understand. The last issue that I'm also trying to get a little smarter on. And I recommend an article by Daza Greenwood, a real expert in this space, around liability for agents. Everybody's negotiating these contracts. Who exactly is liable when the agent goes rogue, books the wrong ticket, spends the wrong amount of money? Is it the provider of the agent? Is it the service? Is it you, the user, for not being careful enough? Are the rules the way they always were? Or is there some new complexity that is being offered? Anyway, a couple of the things that are on my mind. Thanks for joining and letting me share these with you. I want to keep it short today. It's a summer Friday. Hopefully people are getting a little bit of time off or a long weekend. I'm wrapping up hopefully in a couple hours more here, and talk to you next week. And I'll be giving some report out, certainly from Korea when I'm over there. I think the debates and discussions at the global level end up being super important. Happy Friday, everybody, and happy birthday to me.